They were powerful voices,
All right, see ya.
celebrated minds, and cultural icons until they vanished without a trace. This video unpacks some of the most disturbing disappearances in history involving influential figures. These are not ordinary missing person cases. No bodies, no closure, just questions.
On April 10, 1990, at approximately 7:30 p.m., Hong Kong billionaire Teddy Wang Tehui stepped out of the prestigious Hong Kong Jockey Club after what would become his final evening of normalcy. The 56-year-old founder of the China Chem Group, one of Hong Kong's most powerful property empires, walked toward his Mercedes-Benz with no idea that he was about to become the victim of one of Asia's most disturbing and enduring mysteries. What happened next would haunt his wife Nina Wang for the rest of her life, spawn decades of legal battles, and leave investigators grappling with a case that defied all logic and resolution. This wasn't Teddy Wang's first encounter with kidnappers. 7 years earlier, on April 12, 1983, he had been abducted when his Mercedes was hijacked. For 8 terrifying days, he was chained to a bed while his captors demanded ransom. His wife Nina ultimately paid 33 million Hong Kong dollars for his release, and Teddy returned home shaken but alive. The 1983 kidnapping should have been a warning. It should have prompted increased security measures, different routines, more caution. But Teddy Wang was a man who refused to live in fear, and his predictable habits would prove to be his undoing. On that fateful April evening in 1990, Teddy followed his usual routine. He attended the races at the Hong Kong Jockey Club, a favorite pastime of Hong Kong's elite. Witnesses later recalled seeing him in good spirits, discussing business and placing bets with the casual confidence of a man who had built an empire from nothing. As he left the club and approached his Mercedes, several men emerged from the shadows. Unlike the relatively amateur operation 7 years earlier, this kidnapping was executed with military precision. The abductors had clearly studied their target, mapped his movements, and planned every detail. Teddy Wang was forced into a waiting vehicle and vanished into the Hong Kong night. It was the last time anyone who knew him would see him alive. The kidnappers initially demanded 60 million Hong Kong dollars, nearly double what had been paid in 1983. Nina Wang, desperate to save her husband again, prepared to pay. But this time, something was different. The communications were sporadic, the demands unclear, and the usually straightforward process of negotiation became a maze of contradictions. Despite Nina's willingness to pay the ransom, despite the family's compliance with the kidnappers' demands, Teddy Wang never came home. The money was paid, but the billionaire remained missing. What made this disappearance particularly disturbing was that several alleged kidnappers were eventually caught and interrogated. They revealed chilling details about the operation. It had been orchestrated by a sophisticated criminal network operating across Hong Kong, mainland China, and Taiwan. But even under interrogation, they could provide no clear answer about what had happened to Teddy Wang himself. Nina Wang refused to believe her husband was dead. For years after the kidnapping, she continued searching for him, hiring private investigators, following leads, and maintaining hope that somehow, somewhere, Teddy was still alive. The most unsettling aspect of the case emerged years later during legal proceedings. Nina's personal assistant of 27 years testified that pictures and phone calls featuring the missing businessman were still being received after the year 2000, more than a decade after his disappearance. These alleged communications kept Nina's hope alive and made her vulnerable to manipulation, including by a feng shui master who claimed he could help locate her missing husband. Were these genuine signs that Teddy Wang was still alive somewhere? Or were they cruel hoaxes designed to exploit a grieving widow? The truth remains unknowable. In 1999, 9 years after his disappearance, Teddy Wang was declared legally dead. But this legal declaration only marked the beginning of a new nightmare for Nina Wang. The question of Teddy's will, and who would inherit the massive Chinachem empire, sparked a legal battle that would consume the rest of Nina's life. The case became one of Hong Kong's most sensational legal dramas, involving allegations of forged documents, mysterious lovers, and conflicting wills. Nina maintained control of the business empire, transforming herself from a sheltered wife into one of Asia's most powerful businesswomen. But the shadow of her husband's disappearance haunted every decision. More than 3 decades later, the disappearance of Teddy Wang continues to perplex investigators and the public alike. Several aspects of the case remain deeply unsettling. Unlike typical kidnappings, this appeared to be carried out by a highly sophisticated criminal network with international connections. The precision of the operation suggested insider knowledge and extensive planning. Why was the ransom paid, but the victim never returned? In most kidnapping cases, either the victim is released after payment or killed when payment is refused. Teddy Wang's case defied this logic. The alleged pictures and phone calls received years after the kidnapping raised disturbing questions. If Teddy Wang was dead, who was sending these communications? If he was alive, why didn't he return home? Despite extensive searches across multiple countries, no trace of Teddy Wang, alive or dead, has ever been found. In a region where disposing of evidence is challenging, the complete absence of any physical evidence is remarkable. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Teddy Wang's disappearance is the human cost it exacted on those left behind. Nina Wang spent the rest of her life searching for her husband, never remarrying, never fully accepting his death. She died in 2007, still legally fighting over his estate, and still, perhaps, hoping for his return. The case transformed Nina from a sheltered billionaire's wife into one of Asia's most powerful businesswomen, but it also left her vulnerable to manipulation and unable to find peace. She became known for her eccentric behavior, her distinctive pigtails, and her unwavering belief that her husband might still be alive. The disappearance of Teddy Wang remains one of Hong Kong's most compelling unsolved mysteries. It serves as a stark reminder that in a world where money can buy almost anything, it cannot always buy safety, answers, or peace of mind. Steve Vickers, who was chief of the former Royal Hong Kong Police Criminal Intelligence Bureau when the case was active, still believes that Teddy Wang should have come home safely. But, as he noted years later, things went wrong. People didn't listen. The case continues to fascinate because it represents something more than a simple kidnapping gone wrong. It's a story about the vulnerability of even the most powerful people, the unpredictability of criminal enterprises, and the devastating impact of unresolved loss on those left behind. Today, as new generations of wealthy individuals navigate the security challenges of modern Asia, the ghost of Teddy Wang serves as a cautionary tale. His disappearance reminds us that some mysteries are never solved, some questions are never answered, and some people simply vanish into the darkness, leaving only questions and the haunting possibility that somewhere, somehow, they might still be out there, waiting to come home. On April 14, 1990, French singer Alain Kahn descended into the labyrinthine depths of the Paris metro system at Rue de la Pompe station. He was never seen again. What makes this disappearance particularly haunting is not just the complete absence of any trace of the 45-year-old musician, but the eerie prophetic quality of his 1979 album title, Whatever Happened to Alain Z. Kahn. 11 years before his disappearance, Kahn had essentially asked the question that would define his legacy. Born Alain Michel Zissa on September 14, 1944, in Paris, Kahn was a figure who existed perpetually on the margins of the French music scene. Raised by his mother and stepfather, he took his stepfather's surname, having never known his biological father. This early absence of identity would become a recurring theme throughout his life, a man always searching for who he truly was. Kahn's musical career began in the mid-1960s, but it was his transformation in the 1970s that would define his artistic legacy. Inspired by the glam rock revolution led by David Bowie, Lou Reed, and Mark Bolan, Kahn underwent a dramatic metamorphosis that would make him a precursor to openly queer artists in France. His encounter with David Bowie at the Château d'Hérouville studio in 1976 became legendary. Can later recalled, "In Hérouville I met Bowie, who took me away for 10 days in his black Mercedes. Since then I have not missed my discoloration. There have been lots of photos in the press, and since then there has been a kind of respect for me." Can's artistic trajectory was as unconventional as his personal life. His early releases were commercial attempts without particular artistic merit, but gradually his work became increasingly original and creative, even as it became more marginalized. He was a pioneer in French music for not hiding his homosexuality at a time when it was still largely taboo. His 1975 album, Et Gary Cooper s'éloigna dans le désert, and Gary Cooper walked away into the desert, marked his full embrace of glam rock aesthetics. This was followed by Heureusement en France, on ne se drogue pas, Fortunately in France we don't do drugs, in 1976, both albums showcasing his evolution into a more experimental artist. But it was his 1979 release, titled Whatever Happened to Alain Zedkin, that would prove to be eerily prescient. The album title, which seemed like a playful reference to the classic Hollywood noir Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, would become a genuine question that has haunted music enthusiasts for over 3 decades. By 1990, Can had released his final album, Parfum de Nuit, Night Perfumes, in 1986. His career had become increasingly underground, his music appreciated by a cult following, but largely ignored by mainstream French culture. He was a man who had always existed in the shadows, both artistically and personally. The circumstances of his disappearance remain frustratingly vague. On April 14, 1990, exactly 35 years after his birth, Can was last seen at the Rue de la Pompe metro station in Paris's 16th arrondissement. Some witnesses later claimed to have seen him at Châtelet station, but these accounts remain unverified. What was he doing there? Where was he going? These questions remain unanswered. The Paris metro system, with its maze-like tunnels and endless connections, seems almost symbolic of Can's life, a network of underground passages where someone could easily disappear. Rue de la Pompe station, located in one of Paris's most affluent neighborhoods, was an unlikely place for a marginalized artist to vanish. The station itself has become part of the legend. No witnesses reported seeing him leave the station. No surveillance footage captured his movements. He descended into the underground and never emerged. In the years following his disappearance, Can's reputation has only grown. His albums, once dismissed or ignored, have become highly sought-after collector's items. Whatever Happened to Alain Zedkin is now considered a cult classic, described as very hard to find and very sought after by record collectors. The irony is palpable. An artist who was marginalized during his lifetime has become more famous in his absence than he ever was while present. His music, once relegated to the underground, has found new audiences who appreciate his pioneering approach to glam rock and his courage in being authentically himself in a conservative cultural climate. Over the decades, various theories have emerged about what happened to Alain Can. Some suggest he deliberately disappeared, choosing to vanish rather than face the struggles of an aging artist in an industry that had little place for him. Others propose more sinister explanations: violence, accident, or foul play. The lack of any evidence, body, or credible sightings has made every theory equally plausible and equally unsatisfying. Unlike other famous disappearances that generate ongoing investigations or media attention, Can's case has largely been forgotten by mainstream French society, remembered primarily by music enthusiasts and collectors. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of Can's disappearance is how it seems to fulfill the prophecy of his own album title. Whatever Happened to Alain Zedkin wasn't just the name of a record. It became a literal question that has remained unanswered for over 3 decades. The album itself has taken on an almost mythical quality. Released in 1979, it represents Can at his most experimental and artistic. The fact that he essentially asked the question of his own disappearance 11 years before it happened gives the work an eerie, almost supernatural quality. Today, more than 34 years after his disappearance, Alan Khan exists in a strange liminal space between presence and absence. He is simultaneously dead and alive, missing and found, forgotten and remembered. His music continues to circulate in underground circles. His influence can be traced in contemporary French indie and experimental music, yet the man himself remains as elusive as ever. Music critics and historians have begun to recognize him as a significant figure in French popular music, a pioneer who helped pave the way for greater acceptance of LGBTQ+ artists in French culture. His willingness to be openly gay in the 1970s French music scene was revolutionary, even if it wasn't fully appreciated at the time. Whatever happened to Alain Z. Khan? The question he posed in 1979 remains as relevant today as it was then. But perhaps the real question isn't what happened to him, but what he represents. The countless artists, dreamers, and nonconformists who exist on the margins of society, who disappear not just physically, but culturally, erased by a world that doesn't quite know what to do with them. In the end, Alain Khan's disappearance is both a mystery and a metaphor. He vanished into the underground of Paris, just as he had always existed in the underground of French culture. Perhaps, in some poetic sense, he didn't disappear at all. He simply became what he had always been, invisible to the mainstream, visible only to those who knew where to look. The metro trains continue to run through Rue de la Pompe station, carrying millions of passengers through the underground tunnels of Paris. But somewhere in that network of darkness and light, in the spaces between the tracks and the silence between the stations, the ghost of Alain Khan continues to ask his eternal question. Whatever happened to Alain Z. Khan? The answer, like the man himself, remains lost in the underground.